March 1944, Captain Alfred M. Al Sager's P-47. Thunderbolt exploded at 18,000 feet, flak tearing through the cockpit. The stick went dead, and he ejected into the freezing air. His parachute opened, jarring his injured shoulder. Below the German countryside was a looming trap. His war had abruptly darkened. 30 minutes later, Wehrmacht soldiers, rifles aimed, found Sager in a snow-dusted field. He raised his hands, pain searing his shrapnel-torn left arm. The young, efficient soldiers stripped him of his sidearm, jacket and tags, one roughly prodding his wound. Sager bit back a cry, receiving the clear message. He was now property. He was marched to a farmhouse for a brief, contemptuous interrogation by an officer providing only name, rank, and serial number. Allied bomber crews were branded child killers, and Sager knew no sympathy awaited him. The journey to Stalag Luft Interrogation Center lasted 3 days by rail. Sager and 9 other captured airmen, British, American, Canadian, rode a cattle car, enduring winter winds and guttural German commands. Silence and dread filled the car as warriors transitioned to captives. At Stalag Luft, Luftwaffe intelligence officers employed sophisticated methods, isolation, temperature extremes, and deceptive conversations. Sager adhered to the Geneva Convention's minimal responses. 10 days later, he was processed for permanent internment at Stalag Luft III, Saigon, occupied Poland. The eastward train journey spanned 2 frozen days. Sager glimpsed bombed German cities, rubble and revenge through the car slats. Guards grew more hostile deeper into Reich territory. An older, scarred Luftwaffe sergeant, distributing thin soup, possessed eyes reflecting weary recognition of war's consumption. By night, prisoners whispered of Stalag Luft III, Germany's most secure prison camp, tunnels, escape committees, and fatal escape attempts towards neutral Switzerland. Sager listened, his throbbing shoulder ruling out physical escape. March 1944, Stalag Luft III emerged from the morning fog as a vision of systematic imprisonment. Grey barracks stretched behind 15-foot double barbed wire fences. Guard towers, armed with searchlights and machine guns, marked 100-yard intervals. The main gate displayed German camp designations. Hundreds of RAF and USAF prisoners moved between buildings in the North Compound, reserved for American airmen. Over 2,000 Allied officers, all aircrew, were held here, separated from enlisted men. Germans valued pilots and navigators as potential exchange assets, but alive didn't equate to comfort. Processing took 4 hours. Sager was photographed, fingerprinted, and recorded in meticulous German ledgers. A Luftwaffe medical officer detachedly examined and bandaged his shoulder without medication. The officer, speaking precise English, informed Sager of his barrack assignment and the standing order for summary execution upon escape attempts. Sager nodded. The officer conveyed only bureaucratic efficiency, viewing escape as an administrative failing. Barracks 14, a 60-foot wooden structure, sat 18 inches off the ground on concrete posts, a deliberate measure against tunnel digging. Inside, triple-tier bunks, thin straw mattresses, and 2 threadbare blankets per man lined the walls. A central coal stove, daily fueled by 1 insufficient bucket, pervaded the space. The immediate smell was a distillation of unwashed bodies, latrine buckets, mildew, and despair. Designed for 30-60 men lived there, forming a community with sleeping areas, a cooking corner, and a crude library. Yet it remained undeniably a cage. Major James Jimmy Clark, a B-17 pilot shot down 6 months prior, served as the senior American officer in Block 7. Clark, maintaining military formality, assigned Sager an upper bunk near the window, optimal for summer air, brutal for winter cold. Adjacent bunkmates, a Texas navigator, an Ohio bombardier, a Californian pilot with haunted eyes, nodded welcome. They had all endured Sager's journey understanding his unspoken questions, how to survive if he'd see home, what captivity truly meant. Stalag Luft III operated with rigid German efficiency. Morning appel at 6, regardless of weather, involved prisoner formations and lengthy counts, especially if tunnel operations were suspected. Breakfast was ersatz coffee and black bread. Lunch, watery potato soup. Dinner, more bread, occasionally with meagre margarine or synthetic jam. Red Cross parcels, dependent on German goodwill and bombing effects, arrived irregularly, bringing temporary human comfort with tinned meat, chocolate, cigarettes, and soap. Without them, men grew skeletal. Sager observed the camp's hidden systems solidify within his first week. Legendary tunnel operations, Tom, Dick, and Harry, showcased ingenious engineering and desperate resolve. Prisoners crafted air pumps from kit bags, shored tunnels with bed slats, and discreetly dispersed tons of yellow subsoil. The escape committee orchestrated everything with military precision. Forgers created false documents, tailors converted uniforms, intelligence officers memorized schedules, and mapmakers charted routes to neutral countries. This complete underground resistance network thrived within barbed wire. However, Sager faced a harsh truth others avoided. 99% of escapees were recaptured within days, often by the Gestapo, who executed them. The impending Great Escape would brutally confirm this, with 50 RAF officers murdered on Hitler's direct order. Tunnel escape, for those without perfect German, local knowledge, and extraordinary luck, was suicide. Saga, lacking these advantages and burdened by a poorly healed shoulder, found running painful and climbing nearly impossible. Traditional escape was not an option. The psychological burden settled gradually. Guards performed random destructive searches. Prisoners faced verbal abuse, occasional beatings for minor infractions, and transfer threats to punishment camps. The Geneva Convention was theoretical. Captured airmen existed in a grey zone. German propaganda demonized them as terror flyers and baby killers, legitimate targets for civilian revenge. Saga heard tales of lynched airmen, police passively observing. Luftwaffe guards at Stalag Luft III maintained professional distance, but hatred simmered. You bombed our cities. You killed our families. This cage is mercy you don't deserve. 2 months in, Saga witnessed an execution. A British flight lieutenant, Patterson, claiming to have stumbled chasing a letter, was shot dead by a Tower 6 guard for crossing the warning wire. Prisoners watched, forbidden to approach. The commandant's notice, prisoner attempted escape, standing orders executed. No further comment, confirmed their total German subjugation. Patterson joined 60 others in the camp cemetery. This incident crystallized the stark reality. Germans wielded total power. Prisoners possessed only ingenuity and will. That night, amidst drumming rain, Saga conceived his plan. If physical escape was impossible, psychological escape might work. The Germans maintained lists of prisoners eligible for medical repatriation, the severely wounded, critically ill, or mentally incapacitated. Mental breakdown, the phrase resonated. What if he convincingly feigned profound, irreversible psychological collapse, needing institutional care? The Germans, seeing him as a liability, might repatriate him through neutral Switzerland. The plan terrified him. He'd have to convincingly surrender his sanity, becoming the madman, the broken thing others avoided. He would sacrifice dignity, identity, and self-respect. The performance had to be total, sustained, perfect. One slip would lead to solitary confinement or worse, but the alternative was years in this cage, watching men succumb to disease, hope corrode, and liberation perhaps never arrive. Saga began methodical preparation, studying genuinely broken prisoners, a navigator reliving missions, a pilot hoarding trash, a bombardier regressing to childlike behavior. He observed their patterns, speech, mannerisms. memorizing the progression of true mental collapse. He acknowledged weaponizing human suffering, but survival offered no moral luxury. The decision solidified 3 months after capture. Major Clark announced Harry Tunnel's near completion, with 200 prisoners attempting escape. Anticipation and dread filled the camp. Saga, his injury making him a liability, knew he wouldn't be selected. He'd remain behind, watching others gamble their lives. Unless he created his own route, a psychological one the Germans wouldn't guard, unable to conceive of deliberate self-destruction. Saga committed fully. He would become someone else, someone broken beyond repair, whom the Reich would gladly send home to avoid the administrative burden of maintaining a madman. He started subtly, blank stares, non sequiturs, missing formations. Barracks mates noticed, showing concern. Saga repelled them with increasingly erratic behavior, neglected hygiene, unshaven face, nocturnal muttering of invented words. Within 2 weeks, prisoners avoided him. Within 4, guards reported his decline to camp medical staff. The machinery was in motion. Saga had crossed a point of no return, committed to Stalag Luft III's most dangerous escape attempt through apparent madness. German doctors would soon examine him. His performance would determine his fate, home or death in the cage. The transfer, November 14, 1944. Captain Al Sager, an American POW, simulated severe combat neurosis in his isolation barracks. 30 minutes before inspection, he smeared excrement on his face, a final act to complete the documented symptoms of Kriegsneurose. His goal was a medical transfer. The German medical orderly recoiled. Al screamed in disjointed German, a linguistic chaos designed to suggest brain damage. He threw himself against the wall, creating calculated bruises to accompany existing self-inflicted scratches. 3 guards restrained him, while Dr. Wilhelm Schaefer, a Luftwaffe psychiatrist, observed, noting Al's performance with clinical fascination. Schaefer ordered immediate sedation and transfer to the camp hospital, the lazaret. The sedative burned, but Al maintained his act. He knew a transfer would mean weaker security and a facility closer to less guarded borders. German military medical protocols required severe mental illness cases to be consolidated at specialized hospitals away from combat zones. Al woke in a canvas-covered truck, wrists bound, 2 guards opposite him. He feigned a blank stare, muttering nonsense, but internally tracked their route south towards Breslau. His bombardier navigator training made geographic orientation instinctive. The guards, oblivious to his awareness, openly discussed the deteriorating war situation, the Russian advance, and the impending fall of Silesia. At Breslau Reserve Hospital, the intake physician refused Al. The facility was overwhelmed with Eastern Front casualties. Seizing the moment, Al urinated on himself and attempted to drink it. Disgusted, the guards returned him to the truck. New orders: Heine Psychiatric Hospital, 200 kilometers west, near Kassel. The distance thrilled Al. Each kilometer was a step closer to his intended escape route. The 2-day journey involved 2 breakdowns and overnight stops. Al gathered intelligence at each. At a Wehrmacht depot near Görlitz, he noted fuel shortages. Outside Dresden, he saw refugees fleeing the Soviet advance. The guards grew lax, removing his restraints the second night, convinced the madman posed no threat. Al maintained his mumbling, shivering facade, memorizing roads and rivers. Heine Psychiatric Hospital, a medieval monastery converted to a medical facility, appeared against the November sky. On November 17th, Al was admitted to Ward 7. Dr. Ernst Hoffmann, the staff psychiatrist, a malingering expert, reviewed Al's files skeptically. Hoffmann's 4-hour examination tested reflexes, cognition, and memory. Al, prepared through studying legitimate case studies, inconsistently failed memory tests, sometimes recalling obscure details while forgetting his rank. He responded erratically to pain. He created elaborate delusions about his crew, mixing truthful mission details with impossible conversations. Hoffman meticulously documented everything, ordering further neurological assessments. Ward 7 housed 32 patients, mostly German soldiers. Al recognized a genuinely insane British flight lieutenant and a Canadian navigator with head trauma, studying their authentic madness to refine his performance. German patients ranged from catatonic to violent. Orderlies administered sedatives, maintaining Hoffman's research records. Security was minimal. The hospital relied on locked wards and sedation, assuming the insane lacked escape capacity. Al spent his first week mapping routines. The Eastern Ward door checked every 4 hours, laundry detail leaving at 0900 unsupervised. The 3-meter chain-link perimeter fence had overhanging trees on the north side. No searchlights, patrols, or dogs. On November 24th, Hoffman administered electroshock therapy. Al was unprepared. The procedure room reeked of ozone. The first jolt convulsed his body, fragmenting consciousness. When he awoke, Hoffman ordered a second treatment. Al struggled to maintain his act, disoriented, blurring the line between feigned and authentic responses. Treatments continued bi-weekly. Al fought to maintain clarity, the line between performance and reality blurring. He began hearing voices and believing his own delusions. Drawing on POW warnings about prolonged acting, he created mental anchors, reciting his serial number backward, solving navigation problems, visualizing escape routes. This arduous self-discipline kept him tethered to sanity. December brought snow and opportunity. Hospital fuel shortages and staff conscription into Volkssturm units degraded routines. Bed checks became irregular, medication schedules loosened. Al observed growing chaos. On December 8th, he overheard nurses discussing evacuation plans with American and Russian forces converging on Haina. Al decided. Waiting for liberation meant military processing and potential detention to prove his sanity, his charade forever staining his record. Escape now, amidst the chaos, offered independent access to Allied lines. He needed civilian clothes from the basement laundry, food, bread and soup hoarded in a tin, and a route west memorized from his journey and Hoffman's office maps. December 12th, 0300 hours. After feigning sleep, Al picked the ward door lock with a stolen bent wire. The corridor was empty. Barefoot, he moved silently, carrying his coveralls and food. He descended to the basement laundry, changed into the oversized coveralls, and found a worn cap and an ID badge, which he pocketed. The unguarded loading dock exit led to the service road. Al stepped into the frigid night, snow falling. Dressed only in coveralls and cloth shoes, the cold bit instantly. He walked north towards the tree line, maintaining a worker's pace. 50 meters from the trees, searchlights and sirens erupted from the hospital. Al sprinted. The snow was ankle-deep. He crashed into the dense forest as a truck roared down the road, headlights sweeping. He fell repeatedly in the snow-covered undergrowth, hands numb. Lights swept through the trees. Dogs began barking, a tracking team. Al pushed deeper, seeking running water to break his scent. He found an ice-crusted creek flowing west, shockingly cold, knee-deep. Wading upstream, his legs numbed. The current pulled at him. Behind him, the dogs reached to the bank, confused by the lost scent, but handlers would search both directions. Ahead, a fallen oak bridged the creek. Al crawled across, dropped to the far bank, and veered north to create a false trail. His feet now left bloody prints. Hypothermia set in. He was dying in the forest. The dogs picked up his trail. Flashlight beams converged. Al stumbled into a ravine, sliding 20 feet down. He pressed against the rock face, invisible. The searchers, seeing the steep drop, moved on, assuming he had continued west. Al waited, then climbed out, heading southwest parallel to their search line. His navigation training, even without stars, guided him. He walked through the night, each step agony. Dawn found him collapsed against a woodcutter's shed, 2 kilometers from the hospital, hypothermic and delirious. He was no longer shivering. His mind drifted, hallucinating his crew. He tried to speak, but his frozen jaw wouldn't move. The shed door opened. An old woman stood silhouetted, staring at his frozen, bloody, snow-covered figure. Her hand moved towards the door. Al knew this was the pivotal moment. Would she help him or condemn him to die alone in the cold? On January the 20th, 1945, a Swiss border guard observed American Captain Al Sager, gaunt and vacant-eyed, stepping onto neutral ground. Despite his hollow appearance, Sager's heart pounded with the profound weight of newly found freedom. A Red Cross representative noted Sager's severe weight loss and psychological trauma, recommending immediate hospitalization. Sager, who once weighed 165 pounds, was now a mere 128. His trembling hands, a product of malnutrition and the adrenaline of his successful deception, belied his calm facade. He was one of several prisoners exchanged that day, 3 other Americans and 6 British, all genuinely suffering from tuberculosis, severe wounds, or documented mental breakdowns. Only Sager was faking his ailment, a performance stretching over 13 months of feigned insanity, blurring the lines between elaborate act and genuine psychological damage. Upon reaching a temporary medical facility in Constance, Sager was met by American military intelligence officers. Once alone with his countrymen, the charade ended. Captain Albert P. Sager, serial number 0795031, 379th Bombardment Group, he declared, his voice steady for the first time in over a year. The intelligence officers, expecting a psychiatric casualty, were astonished by his lucidity. Sager immediately launched into a detailed intelligence briefing, covering Stalag Luft III's layout, guard routines, and the repercussions of the Great Escape tunnels. Within 20 minutes, he was sketching diagrams of the North Compound, marking new barracks locations, and identifying corruptible German guards versus fanatical Nazis. The debriefing spanned 6 grueling hours. Sager provided crucial intelligence on 73 fellow prisoners, outlined the escape committee's current operations, and detailed the security enhancements implemented after the fateful March 1944 mass escape, which led to 50 murders. His physical examination revealed the true cost of his performance. Beyond severe weight loss, Sager suffered from vitamin deficiency, partial hearing loss in his right ear from interrogations, and back scarring from a beating received after he intentionally soiled himself in front of a German colonel. Doctors noted potential psychological trauma but couldn't differentiate between the effects of his method acting and the genuine combat stress from his bomber mission. Sager, insisting he was fit for duty, resisted extensive psychiatric evaluation. However, the intelligence officers overruled him, sending him to a U.S. Army hospital in Bern, where repatriated POWs underwent observation. For 3 weeks, he regained weight and underwent further debriefings with analysts from Washington who sought information on Luftwaffe interrogation techniques and camp security. On February 15, 1945, Sager flew to England, then crossed the Atlantic on a military transport, arriving in New York on February the 28th. He was strictly instructed to never reveal his escape method. The strategic advantage of Germans believing their psychiatric screening was foolproof was too great, preventing others from potentially replicating his technique. His official record merely stated repatriation for medical reasons via prisoner exchange. His family in Muskegon, Michigan, received a telegram on March 1st announcing his return. His mother later recounted to reporters her inability to recognize his hoarse voice during his New York call. When his father inquired about torture, Sager truthfully denied it. The Germans had beaten him, but categorized it as therapeutic intervention for a violent patient, not interrogation. The Army Air Forces promoted Sager to Major in April 1945, awarding him the Distinguished Service Cross in a discreet ceremony at Wright Field, Ohio, on May 30th, 1945. The citation commended his extraordinary heroism and resourcefulness in a successful escape that provided valuable intelligence to Allied forces, conspicuously omitting the specifics of his method. He also earned the Purple Heart for injuries sustained during his B-17's downing and the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters for his combat missions before capture. Though he wore the ribbons, he rarely discussed their significance. Sager continued his service in the Army Air Forces, which became the independent United States Air Force in 1947. He participated in the Berlin Airlift, 1948-49, commanded a transport squadron during the Korean War, and retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1964. He married in 1947, had 3 children, and became a civilian flight instructor post-retirement. He attended Stalag Luft III ex-POW reunions, where fellow prisoners knew the truth of his escape. Roger Bushell's second-in-command, a survivor who ended up in another camp, confirmed that Sager's method had been discussed but deemed too perilous for widespread use due to the risk of psychological damage and the rare skill required. Sager shared fragments of his POW experience with his family, but never the intimate details of his performance. His daughter once found him in 1958, staring blankly in his garage. When asked if he was all right, he replied, "Just remembering how to do that, making sure I still can tell the difference." Sager's complete escape story remained classified until 1973, when the Air Force declassified documents regarding POW escape and evasion for updated CR training. Even then, his name was redacted in most documents. The first public account surfaced in 1979 when Dr. Philip Smith, a military historian researching unconventional escapes, found references in declassified intelligence reports and located Sager for an interview. Sager, then 58 and retired in Arizona, granted 2 interviews under the condition that nothing be published until after his death. He died of a heart attack on March 12, 1982, at age 61. Smith's article, "The Madman of Stalag Luft III, An Unconventional Escape Through Psychiatric Deception," published in the Journal of Military History in 1984, garnered little attention outside academic circles. The story's obscurity might have persisted had it not been for Dr. Klaus Becker, a former Luftwaffe psychiatrist who published his memoirs in 1989. In a chapter on American POWs feigning mental illness, Becker described Sager's case anonymously, hailing him as the most convincing psychiatric actor I encountered in 40 years of practice. Becker, who had examined Sager 3 times in Frankfurt, admitted his lingering uncertainty even in 1989 about Sager's authenticity, stating, "His commitment was total. He exhibited symptoms I had only seen in genuine catatonic patients. If it was an act, he should have been on stage, not in a bomber." This German publication rekindled American interest. The Air Force Historical Research Agency released additional documents, and in 1991, the television program Escape featured Sager's story in a series on unusual POW escapes. Today, SEER instructors at Fairchild Air Force Base reference Sager's case when teaching resistance techniques, though they explicitly caution against his method. The severe psychological risks and the immense difficulty of sustaining such a performance render it impractical for most prisoners. Nevertheless, his case powerfully illustrates that psychological warfare can be individually waged, not just at strategic levels, and that captors' assumptions about mental illness can be exploited. A 2003 revision of Air Force survival doctrine includes a sanitized version of his technique under Advanced Resistance Through Deception, complete with explicit warnings about psychological damage and the absolute requirement for exceptional mental discipline. In 2005, The Air Force unveiled a display about unconventional escapes at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Sager's Distinguished Service Cross is exhibited alongside a brief account of his escape, though the display primarily highlights his post-war service and contributions to the Berlin airlift. In 2007, his daughter donated his personal papers to the museum, including a journal from his retirement years detailing his 13-month performance. One poignant entry reads, "I became what I pretended to be, or perhaps revealed what I actually was. The Germans never understood that a sane man could choose madness as a weapon. I'm still not sure I do." The significance of Sager's escape stretches far beyond its individual success. He was one of only 11 Americans from Stalag Luft III to successfully evade German control before liberation, and uniquely, the sole one to do so through psychiatric deception. His invaluable intelligence regarding the Great Escape's aftermath informed Allied planners about German reprisal policies and shaped decisions concerning war crimes prosecutions. His debrief reports on the execution of the 50 escapees were submitted as evidence at the Nuremberg trials. More broadly, his case proved that the German military's seemingly thorough and scientific psychiatric screening could be overcome with sufficient dedication and a nuanced understanding of psychiatric symptoms. This profound revelation significantly influenced post-war intelligence services training of operatives in resistance to psychiatric interrogation. What Sager undeniably demonstrated is the human mind's capacity to be weaponized against itself, wielded with deliberate precision. Sanity, he proved, encompassed the ability to simulate its absence convincingly enough to deceive even experts. His year-long performance demanded meticulous control over every twitch, every vacant stare, every manufactured outburst or catatonic state, all while maintaining enough internal coherence to never forget his true identity. That he succeeded without genuinely fracturing, or at least without irreparably fracturing, remains a remarkable feat. Yet the enduring cost of maintaining that performance, which haunted him for the remaining 37 years of his life, was an inevitable consequence. He achieved freedom from Stalag Luft III, not through tunnels, cut wire, or forged documents, but through the most arduous escape route imaginable, the deliberate dismantling and reconstruction of his own mind, performed daily before a skeptical audience of professionals who held his life in their hands. He walked out through the front gate, his captors congratulating themselves on their humanitarian treatment of the mentally ill. His greatest deception was making them believe he had been defeated.